Hello and welcome. I'm Jonathan Baggaley, Chief Executive of the PSHE Association. We're the national body for PSHE education, and we're delighted to be working with financial education charity Young Money to bring you 3 Twilight workshops to mark this week, which is Talk Money Week. This first session focuses on successful financial education in primary schools. Tomorrow's session focuses on successful financial education in secondary schools. And then Wednesday's session is going to cover money-related issues of greatest concern to young people right now, from gambling and fraud to cashless society and cryptocurrency. Before I introduce Russell and Sarah, I just wanted to speak briefly about the importance of ensuring that all children and young people benefit from financial education that prepares them for an increasingly complex world. As the national body for personal, social health and economic education, or PSHE, we're very keen that the E in PSHE, which of course stands for economic, is given the status it deserves. When taught well, it perfectly complements all of the fantastic work taking place in citizenship and maths, but focuses more on the personal aspect of economic well-being. For example, understanding personal debt, positive and negative debt, and being entrepreneurial. We led the campaign for statutory PSHE education, and though we've had significant success, now that health and relationships education aspects are now compulsory, financial education and economic well-being mustn't suffer in comparison. After all, physical health, mental health, and relationships can heavily affect our economic well-being and vice versa. So we'll be working hard with our membership of teachers and schools and organizations like Young Money and the Money and Pension Service to provide guidance and resources to support you with this important work. Now, our session today is led by Russell Winnard, Director of Programs and Services at Young Money. Young Money is part of the national charity Young Enterprise and provides resources, training and support to anyone working with young people to develop their financial capability. They have over 20 years experience of working with a wide range of educators to develop and deliver young people they work with. Russell began his career as an accountant within the law. He knows a good deal more about money than I do before moving into education. For all young people to develop the knowledge, skills and attributes beyond the traditional academic learning, and prompted the decision to join the charitable sector supporting schools to address this. And we're also delighted to be joined by Sarah Bryce, a Year 6 primary school teacher and financial education lead across 2 primary schools. Whilst teaching in Key Stage 2, she became aware of the lack of teaching and children's awareness of the skills and attitudes towards the value of money. In 2019, her school embarked on a journey to become a centre of excellence in financial education with the help of Young Money and Young Enterprise, and they were successful in achieving the award accreditation. She joins us today to share her experiences and advice. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. I hope you find it a really useful session. The Q&A box is open, so please do ask your questions. We have staff from the PSHE Association and Young Money on hand to answer your questions. And we've got quite a lot of you with us today, which is fantastic. But if we can't get to your question, don't hesitate to contact us or Young Money afterwards. And we'll provide contact details in the chat. The chat box is also open, so do introduce yourselves and have a chat whilst, of course, paying attention to the fabulous conversation I know we're about to hear from Russell and Sarah. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Russell to introduce the situation.
Super. Thank you ever so much, Jonathan. Absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to a fantastic discussion. I'm really looking forward to having a chat about financial education within primary schools. It's fantastic to be supporting Talk Money Week, which is the initiative from the Money and Pension Service with a focus on money and finance over this week. And most importantly, being able to speak about how financial education has been considered, embedded, delivered, possibly even assessed within a primary school setting, and sharing that in what I hope is some really rich discussion this afternoon. And to do all of that with me, I'd like to introduce Sarah. Hello, Sarah.
Hi.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining me. And as we've said many times before, we're going to keep this really informal. It's just a chat between you and I with a few people listening in. Sarah, Jonathan gave you a little bit of an introduction there. And I think pertinent for me is the fact that a Year 6 primary school teacher, but also managing financial education across 2 schools which is quite unique. And I just wondered if you could give us just a little bit more background about those schools.
Of course, yeah. So I started my career at a school called Cheam Park Farm, primary. The social class was obviously very, very high. We didn't have a lot of pupil premium. A lot of children had quite a good understanding of money, but it was more about implementing like the importance of money. And then 2 years later down the line, so last year, I moved to a school called Brookfield Primary Academy. And that school is within the same trust, the Leo Academy Trust. And we noticed this school, their social demographic was very, very different to Cheam Park Farm. So I wanted to make sure they were accessing exactly the same curriculum as Cheam Park Farm, but it needed to be slightly altered because we didn't obviously want to affect home life. We also knew the different needs of the children.
Super. And I think it's really important, isn't it, to recognise those differences?
Yes, definitely.
Financial education, I've never seen financial education being delivered the same in any two schools. And that's quite right, because everyone's needs are different. So they're good to hear. And
each year as well, very different. So last year when I taught it at Brookfield, and this year, very different. Like we've got a lot more pupil premium children this year, obviously because of COVID and things like that. So very, very different this year.
Yeah, I can well imagine that over the last probably 18 months or so, teaching across the board, not only financial education, but everything has just changed so much. No, it's super. And what we've not mentioned yet is that Cheam Park Farm is a centre of excellence for financial education, which is a young money program, but it's really about the school taking on board really good practice financial education, meeting the needs of young people and the teachers. And I just wondered if you could give me a little bit more about what being a centre of excellence means to you in the school.
I feel so when we began our journey to becoming a centre of excellence, we held our hands up and we did a baseline assessment, and we realised we looked at the Young Money framework and we were only teaching 16% of the Young Money Enterprise framework. And that was in things like maths and PSHE, and lots of schools are doing it but not realising. But when we started the Centre of Excellence journey, we realised actually we needed to start teaching explicit financial education lessons, because it wasn't broad enough. We felt like we really needed to implement it into our curriculum. So now both schools run 3 explicit financial education lessons every half term. So they alternate with PSHE. And I just feel we ask the children as well, and they're always like, oh, I actually really, really enjoyed it, because it's really meaningful and they can relate it to real life. Like a lot of them have got like Go Henry cards. And in a lesson we did just before half term, we were looking at the difference between credit and debit. And they wanted to know if their Go Henry card was a credit or debit card. So it was just really realistic. And for them, I think it just should really be embedded into the curriculum.
And so the provision that you've worked up it's been actually informed by the children, because they've highlighted the things that they want to learn about.
Yeah, so in 2019 we did the assessment, and obviously we had our mentor come and help us, and we were only teaching 16%, and myself and another lady called Faye realised that we needed to work on this, and by the end of our accreditation we were teaching 66%, and that was we did a little and often, so all teachers had to do 1 financial education lesson every half term, whereas this year, because we've already implemented financial education, we now teach 3 lessons every half term. So we've built on it, and obviously we're 3 years in now, so it's fully embedded into our curriculum. But back in 2019 we didn't do hardly any. We were only doing like 1 lesson every half term. So yeah.
And I'm sure the children have seen a difference as well.
Definitely.
They recognise that they're doing it.
Yes, but also it's because obviously we implement it now right from nursery, and it's good for us as the year 6 teachers, because they get to year 6 and they've had financial education all the way from the age of 4 or 5. So for us it's good because it's implementing.
Super. I've got a question for you a little bit later on about that importance of starting early, but before we go there, I'm just interested in your perspective on the value that financial education brings to the children in your school.
So I think all of us now, we feel like by the time they leave primary school, we want to teach them about, we don't want to teach them the importance of money. We just want to teach them about like the skills and attitudes towards money, so that they avoid getting into problems like debt in the future, or and also because there's lots of lessons about jobs and careers, so it links quite nicely about like work ethic and things like that, and just making sure we want to make sure they're not experiencing like financial exploitation as well. So we just want to make sure they leave primary school ready for high school, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, it's preparing them for that next stage, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you mentioned about some of the challenges and maybe some of the things for them to avoid. And I just wondered if, even in primary school, there are sometimes habits which are being formed which maybe aren't so positive, whether there's anything like that you've come across. I know you're year 6, so you're getting at the upper end. I know we tend to associate money problems with 16, 17, 18-year-olds, but I know that it can happen younger.
So we had 2 big things. So at the start of every financial education lesson, like every single year group, they do like a money tree. And so even like our year 6s, they sort of assumed that money just comes from credit cards. They can go to the hole in the wall and get money out. They didn't really have that understanding of where money came from. And the same with the younger ones. The problem was like the value of money. So we did a lesson all about like, what would you spend £20 on? And we had children talking about Lamborghinis, and it was just extreme. So I think there are quite a lot of problems to begin with, because actually you realise the lack of money. I think parents as well are also quite worried about teaching them about the importance of money. And actually, I'm not a parent, but I feel like that's one of the most important skills that they should be learning, because when they go to high school, they're going to need it.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I was, one of the things that I've come across with some primary school teachers is the console games, Xbox, PlayStation, etc., and this concept of loot boxes, which is a little bit worrying, and whether the children actually understand what's going on there, because it's a small form of gambling, really. So I don't know if you've come across that. And
it's keeping up with their friends. So like my children at the moment love like buying FIFA points for FIFA, and they're like, it's all right, I'll just put it on my mum's credit card. And I don't think they actually realise that that's actually costing money, and actually they're then competing against each other. They're like, oh, my mum bought me that. And it's that competition, but actually that's then affecting the parents, because the parents probably also feel like they need to keep up with the other parents. So yeah, we have that quite a lot.
Yeah, it's an interesting one that you don't necessarily see it as gambling, but actually it's the start of something. You raise a really interesting point there as well about cards, and a lot of your examples were about young people using cards.
Yeah.
Which, if we went back 20 years, young people would all be using cash. And whether you think that there is does it make a difference, this move to a cashless society? Do you think it's making a difference in the way young people learn about it?
Because I'm talking on behalf of my class, but they automatically assume that this money on this plastic card is endless amounts of money. And we did a conversation about where this actually comes from. And they're like, oh, you can't just, at the start, so when I did it in year 4, when we started financial education at Cheam Pot Farm, they just presumed you could put the money in the thing and you just get endless amounts of money. Because I said, how much do you think you can get out of there? Some were saying like thousands of pounds. And I said, but what happens if I need more money? And they were like, you can go back and get more. I don't think they realise. And that partly is what an issue, because obviously we want to teach them the value of money, whereas these cards, it's difficult because they don't actually see the concept of money with the card. But we teach it alongside it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and absolutely makes sense. And I think that's the approach that I'm beginning to see, is because cash is being used less and less, and all of those transactions now are becoming cashless, that there's actually an extra step of learning that has to be imparted, which is what's actually happening then when you're touching your card, that reader, or even you're paying with your phone. You kind of need to speak through that transaction process to understand it. It's a funny one, because I'm of an age where I grew up just with cash. I was using cash, and actually it has a psychological effect on you as well. If I got a £20 note, there's no way I was breaking into that £20 note for something small. But we all tap away now, don't we?
The other thing we found a problem with is them learning about change, because obviously when you just tap, they're not getting any change. So when we're teaching them about change, like we teach it quite low down, and they're thinking, but what is change? Because they're going to the shop, they're not going to shop with their pocket money, £1. They're actually going with their mum with a debit card or a credit card. So that is also quite difficult. So like that extra stage we have to teach them.
Because I think that's even in the I think it's Key Stage 1 maths curriculum is counting change. So even that's changing, isn't it? Because what on earth is change? If we're not using money, how do we get change?
Exactly.
Interesting. Yeah. One of the areas that I said I'd come back to was the very early stages. So year R, year 1, year 2. We know, because there's a lot of research out there that people will come across. If you Google financial education and starting early, you will find Cambridge University research that says that money habits begin to be formed by the age of 7. And that's been a really, really important piece of research, because it's shifted the dial down to primary and to early primary, thinking about, well, if habits are being formed by 7 years old, what are we doing prior to 7 years old to prepare these young people for the habits that they're forming? And I just wondered, you mentioned your work is through to year 6.
I'm just going to share my slides with you, because I've got our curriculum. Can you see that?
Brilliant. Yes.
Yeah. Lovely. Okay, I'm going to show you. So our younger. So let me show you. Where are they? So this is the sort of thing we do for our younger children. So it'd be things like, so with the nursery, I sat with the nursery teacher and said, look, what do you need? Because obviously pre-COVID, they can't even do anything. So we start off a lot by looking at just looking at the note, not even knowing the value, just what would you do with this note? And we do a lot of things like role play. And the teacher, at the moment, the teacher's actually in the shop pretending to be a teacher. And I think just exposing them so young. And then as they move on to like reception year 1, they're building on that. So they've seen the note, they've played with it in nursery, and then they look at the note in reception and they go, oh, that's a £5 note. What can I do with that? So we start it from the very, very early ages. And then obviously when they get higher up, they then understand, because I think we felt when we started our journey to the Centre of Excellence, they didn't understand the value of money. And I think now, because we do the money tree, manifesto lesson from the very beginning, even our nursery children, we show them a £20 note. When we did it in 2019, they wanted to spend it on a Lamborghini, whereas now they understand actually the concept of what £20 is. I think it's just exposing them to it from an early age and letting them play with it, and actually knowing that it's not scary. I think this perception of money that is scary just needs to be wiped, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's fantastic to see what you're doing at such an early age, and that really plays to that research and that importance of forming money habits by the time we get to age 7. And then, of course, it's not as if that's a done deal. We need to continue that education as you're doing through year 4, 5, 6, and then into secondary as well. Such an important role. Super. It's great to see these. This is fantastic to see the curriculum.
I've got going back to the change situation. So when obviously we launched it, we had money ambassadors as well. So there was one from each year group, and they run like a Fruity Friday crossing over with our healthy schools. So that runs every Friday, and children bring in like money, and that's like looking at change. And actually, it's really, really nice because they took ownership over the whole thing, and they really, really enjoy it. So yeah.
Super. You mentioned healthy schools actually, and I fondly remember healthy schools from working around certain local authorities, and actually some people have said to me that becoming a centre of excellence is a little bit like healthy schools, that kind of criteria that you have to achieve and taking it off. Would you agree?
Yes, I would definitely agree. Yeah, there is a lot to it. There is a lot to achieve your accreditation. There is a lot to it, but actually you're doing it anyway. It's just finding the evidence for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, the embedding into the curriculum looks fantastic. Yeah, particularly those early years. Have there been any unexpected opportunities?
I think so. What we did even prior to the Centre of Excellence, we used to take our year fours and fives to the Metro Bank. So we were doing that anyway, but that was relating to our maths curriculum. And then we realised we could do, actually it could be part of financial education. So we do lots of things like that. And workshops like the NatWest Money Sense workshops, they're all free. Like, our children absolutely love them. So unfortunately, we haven't had anyone in because of coronavirus, but they do some amazing online workshops and our children have loved them. And I feel like implementing that from the get-go to like really embed it into the curriculum is ideal.
Super. And you mentioned Money Sense, which is NatWest's resource. In terms of where you go to find your resources, where do you go?
So when we began our Centre of Excellence, we paid into the Young Money, Young Enterprise planning. I would 100% say to pay into it, because it's very similar to Twinkle. All the slides are there, the resources are there. They are really, really good lessons. We have that. Obviously the Money Sense, the NatWest workshops. Also, so using the Young Money framework, we take the learning objective and do a lot of it ourselves as well, because like we said previously, we want those lesson objectives, the learning objectives, to meet the needs of your children in your school. So like the lessons I planned at Cheam Park Farm, sometimes they didn't suit the children at Brookfield because they were slightly different, but you could use part of it. And I know as well, lots of teachers have probably heard of Twinkle. They've just started financial literacy lessons as well. So lots on there as well.
Brilliant. I didn't know that about Twinkle. That's good to know. I will check.
It's happened. It's just recently as well. Very recent.
Super. And the other question with regard to you embedding within the curriculum was whether you've seen that support any other school priorities at all.
I personally think that was the priority. I think because of that, when we did our baselines, because of the lack of knowledge in the curriculum for financial education, we realised that. But we realised we needed to implement it as soon as possible. But also the skills and attitudes as well, because a lot of our children are like, they don't really care. Like, I'm talking obviously on behalf of our school, but they don't realise that actually their skills and attitudes that they're learning now will affect them later on in life. So I just think we needed to implement that from the get-go.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. I want to move a little bit away from the positive to look at any challenges, because there's always challenge whenever you try to implement anything. There's always challenges, and I'm just wondering with financial education, where were your challenges and how did you navigate around those challenges?
I think so. There's two big ones. So obviously the first one, so we obviously started our journey to becoming a Centre of Excellence in 2019. So for us, it was all during the COVID pandemic. So we realised we had a lot more parents put on furlough, and we had a lot more children, families who required financial support. So we had to be very careful as teachers how we went about delivering the lessons, because we didn't want to upset parents. We didn't want children to go home and be like, oh, this is what we should be doing. The other difficulty we found with financial education is the delivery to begin with, because I know as a teacher how much you have to cram into your timetable. There is literally no room in the day for anything but, like I said, a little and often. That's what we did to begin with, to introduce it. And then it just became a norm. It just became something that all teachers had to put into their curriculum. So I just think that those are the two things, of being very careful about how you're pitching your financial education lessons, obviously depending on the school's demographics and obviously the timing and the timetables.
Yeah, and was there anything unexpected that you managed to achieve as a result of
I think education? Because obviously when we got our accreditation, we were obviously in the COVID pandemic, so we were actually at home learning. So myself and my colleague Faye thought, we're not going to be able to do this. We did get an extended deadline, but actually we were still managing to teach the lessons at home anyway. So I think that was our biggest challenge. We didn't think we were going to be able to deliver the financial education lessons, but actually we were able to, and actually it gave them time to think because they were actually at home on their own as well. And I think they could put it into real life context.
Yeah, and I think that context is so crucially important, isn't it? Because
definitely,
my view is that you can bring any subject alive with a financial context, make it real, whether it's art, drama, IT, whatever it is, you can bring that financial context and make it more real, relevant, engaging. And also home learning, that's a really interesting point, because we know how important the influence of parents are on children's behaviours, their attitudes around money, and I just wondered how you've alluded to it a couple of times. You've had to think quite carefully about parents and working, and how you've managed that kind of home school split, and whether you have managed to engage parents.
So obviously we knew it was a partnership between the school and the parent, but we've also, as teachers, have had to understand that all our pupils have different experiences with money and financial literacy at home. So we just feel as teachers, we just want to provide them with the knowledge and skills to help them, rather than actually going home and being like, this is what you should be doing. No. So, and it's just, I just feel schools could provide I feel like at our school, especially like within our Leo Academy Trust, we can provide our parents as well with financial support. And it would be done like in an unbiased way, because I feel like our schools are very different. I've got very different demographics. And I feel like as a teacher, we want our children to go home and understand the skills, rather than actually going, this is what I should be doing, because, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does, because I think there's quite a different opportunity at home than there is in school. Certainly, you really want the children to go home and maybe apply what they've learned, but they can do so in a real context, can't they?
Yeah.
I don't know. This is a slightly controversial question, but do you use real money in school for financial education?
No, we put real money on the slides, but we don't have plastic money. In case like we've completely scrapped plastic money, because I just feel there's no point. They actually need to be holding the real life thing. Yeah, so we make sure like online, like it's all real. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I know that some schools do use real money, because they want there's a smell, isn't there? There's a weight to it. It's real. You can do rubbings, etc. But I also know that presents quite a challenge to a number of schools.
It does, definitely.
The risk there. So,
and I feel like with the younger ones, they should be exposed to real money. Like the older ones see it quite often, but I think with the younger ones, like when we were talking about the role play, actually physically holding real money and actually knowing that a toy car isn't the same as a toy 20p. So I think that's the problem. It's all plastic, and they think I know it is plastic now, but just actually being able to hold real life money, especially in the younger years.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think there are so many schools that have taken that decision not to use plastic money. Yeah. And it may mean that they can't use plastic or real money, but they've taken that decision because there is a difference.
Yeah, definitely.
And if they can't use the real thing, then they won't use plastic. No, it's really interesting discussion.
No, it is.
There will be loads of teachers listening to this that can identify with that and understand the challenge that there is around that. I suppose, thinking about others watching this and your experience of taking a school to become a centre of excellence for financial education, supporting other schools in your local area with their financial education provision.
Yeah.
I wonder if you've got any kind of top tips, any key things that you would want to pass on to others.
So obviously my biggest tip would be a little and often, because I know how hectic a timetable is. And like with your staff, because I know like in a staff meeting, if you're going to sit in there going, right, we're now going to start financial education lessons, teachers going to sit there and think, actually, no, this isn't, I can't fit any more in. But as a teacher, talking of my personal experience, and I've done the staff meetings with 2 schools and with my colleague, actually the teachers now realise how important it is to teach it from an early age. And like, it's taken us 3 years to get where we are, but like, as long as you're teaching, so in 2019 we were only teaching 1 lesson per half term, but now we're obviously teaching 3. But I would just say like a little and often, and just don't cram it all in one go, because, and for the children as well, like our children only knew 16% of the Young Money, Young Enterprise framework. So, and we thought we were teaching quite good financial education lessons, but obviously now we're obviously have embedded it fully into our curriculum. But I know how busy timetables can be, and implementing it, just do it a little and often. I'd also say as well, so we're in the Leo Academy Trust, and Cheam Park Farm and Brookfield are partner schools, so we work together. This year, obviously, we're in like our 3rd year, so we've shared our curriculum out with the 3 or 4 other schools that are in our trust as well now. So just sharing the planning, obviously, as well, is like the biggest thing for a teacher. But the Young Money, Young Enterprise like the framework, it's all set, all the learning objectives are there, and it's split into skills, attitudes. It's really, really helpful. And just, yeah, my only advice would be a little and often, don't cram it all in one go.
Superb. I love that description. You've done far better job of describing the financial education planning framework than I could ever do. It's if people want to see it, it's free to download. You can get it on the Young Money website. It's differentiated by age, different learning outcomes that we believe are appropriate at different ages. But it's entirely up to teachers and other educators to interpret according to the needs and abilities of your young people. Super. I just wondered, before we finish up, Sarah, I've seen on the slideshow a couple of times this sort of snake
roadmap. Yeah, we can show you. Yeah. Let me go back.
It would be great. It would be great if you could sort of walk us through. Yeah. That looks like it's an overview of your whole delivery. Right.
So what we do, as a hub, as the Leo Academy Trust, we do roadmaps. So this was at the start. So this is when we were teaching. So we taught 16%, and then we taught 66%. So this is when we were teaching 1 lesson per half term. So you'll notice a lot of them overlap. So you'll notice here, like in year 3, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but you'll notice that year 3 and year 4 both do New Year's resolutions. You'll notice that year 5 and 6 both look at different currencies, because this is because when we started it, they didn't have the previous knowledge. So we had to sort of repeat. But this year, obviously they'd already done it. So we updated it. Again, it was updated in 2021, so at the start of this year, and it's a lot more specific to the Young Money, Young Enterprise framework, because we've already done the basics. We did obviously the basics in 2019, and it just sets out step by step what they should all be achieving by the end of once they leave year 6. So if you start from like reception or nursery now, that's what they should have achieved by the end of year 6. But obviously we're playing catch up in year 6 and 5 and 4, because obviously they haven't had the previous knowledge, but they're old enough to understand. So, but yeah, that's how we sort of set it out. Yeah. No,
it's fantastic. It's a really, really clear way of setting out that progression journey. And
I'll show you the other, I'll go on to the other slide. Where is it? So this here as well. So every year group has their own table as such. So like in autumn 1 they have 3 different lessons, but if you look at year 3, lesson 2 and lesson 3, they have the same theme, but they build on the knowledge. So that's like the attitude and the skill from the Young Money, Young Enterprise framework. So it's very clear. So that's all I give to the teachers, and then I guide them to go on to the Young Money framework planning, go to Twinkle, go to here, or just make up your own, because a lot of teachers do have prior knowledge anyway. So, and what is nice about financial education, it's very discussion based, and you can get a lot from the children. So whatever the children are saying, your conversation can steer off in that direction, which is nice.
Yeah, it's my favorite thing. There's generally no right or wrong. It's Do you understand it? Can you talk about it? Are you making informed decisions? Yeah, it's nice. You also you mentioned briefly there about the impact of COVID and catch-up curriculum, and I'm sure there are people listening, watching, who are thinking, well, if I go and take this to senior leadership, they're going to turn around and say, look, your priorities are elsewhere. We've got to focus on X, Y, Z. What would you say to senior leaders right now about
what I would love to say is financial education is probably as important, if not more so now, because of the COVID pandemic. I just feel like I can't imagine our schools now not teaching financial education, and our children, I don't think our children ask us, is it financial education or PSHE this week? Like, I just think it's so important to teach it from the get-go. Like, and I can imagine you now wanting to go and ask SLT and they're saying no, but I think just telling them actually how important it is. And I'm really obviously really passionate about financial education, and I just want people to actually realize, because when we started it, we were like, oh, it's another thing to add to our list. But actually now we've embedded it into our curriculum. We are so passionate as school, as our, like the hub, our North Cheam hub, to actually deliver it effectively. So I just think just try your best to get it into the curriculum.
Super. No, it's fantastic. Thank you, Sarah, ever so much. If Jonathan is still there, I was going to invite Jonathan back on, and just if there was anything there that you wanted to pick up on.
I think, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for such a fabulous overview of the brilliant work that you're doing. I think it was really interesting, this, I mean, lots of different points, but this point about the fact that this is something young people want and making it relevant to their lives, and the fact that there's any subject seen through you can kind of look through a financial lens, and that really can bring it to life for young people. And I think across PSHE as well, this is something that, you know, if we think about what PSHE is trying to do and trying to enable young people to be able to make their own decisions with the knowledge and skills they need, almost all of our decisions have some kind of financial element, and making those links across, I think, you know, this is what kind of young people want and need. And this point, I love this kind of repetition of little and often, which seems like across both on financial education and other aspects of PSHE, because what you've done there, as far as I can tell, is this really not only work out, okay, how are we going to get this into the curriculum time we need, but brought people along with you by showing, hang on, this is doable in little bits and bobs, and then the teachers you're working with seeing the value of it, and the young people seeing the value of it, and it then becoming this kind of irresistible force, because, you know, everyone's on board. And I think there's huge lessons that we can all take from that, both for financial education and, you know, I think some of the questions in the chat have been around, you know, how to do financial education and do the other aspects of PSHE, how you're kind of squaring that circle as well. But from what you've said, I'd take this lesson of actually it's not always a question of, but how do we get the buy-in and the turn it into an irresistible force so that everyone is behind it? And then arguably I mean, I know I'm simplifying hugely, and I totally appreciate the pressures on curriculum time, but in doing that, you can kind of bring the whole school with you. Yeah. So I mean, really, it's fantastic to see what you're doing, and I know that you know, everyone up there, I'm sure, would have found that really, really helpful. Any questions, Russell? The kind of advice service, don't you, for schools? Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, we have Young Money Advisory Service, which is free for anybody delivering financial education to young people, whether that be parents, teachers, carers, youth workers, and we've got Braden, who's in the background answering some of those questions, and will continue to do so. If you wanted to go to the Young Money website and just search for advisory service, you'll find how to get in contact. But I just also wanted to say a huge thank you to Sarah. It was I'm just reading through because I've finally worked out how to use the chat function. I'm just reading through a lot of the messages. You're getting a huge amount of thank yous from people and appreciation for sharing, which I think is probably one of the most important things that we can do as teachers is share with other teachers. I think it's extremely valuable. So huge thank you for your time. And Jonathan, a huge thank you to you and the PSHE Association for helping us put this on. Very, very much appreciated.
Well, thank you for such an interesting session. And and Sarah taking what I know will be precious time. So thank you. And tomorrow we are back again, same time, same place, wherever this place is. We're in the internet somewhere, to look at successful financial education in secondary as well. So for those of you with an interest in secondary, please do join us then. Russell, I will see you then. And Sarah, it's been a real pleasure and thank you. And we will, any questions for the PSHE Association as well, always on hand at info@pshe-association.org.uk. Forward to seeing some of you the rest of the week. Thank you very much.